Hey there. Good afternoon. You have 506 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, Congressman Ben Cline will join us, 5:30. He's on the House Judiciary Committee, one of the members of Congress questioning FBI Director Christopher Wray today. We'll try and find out if he has any big takeaways from that exchange. Covered so many issues. More of the audio sound bites coming up from that hearing and the congressman's reaction. I want to reflect upon some breaking news today. The White House, while Joe Biden is overseas, missing NATO meetings because he's too tired. Isn't that awful? He's too fatigued to attend some of the meetings that these NATO leaders were having. Sorry, the President of the United States can't come. It's way past his bedtime. What? Yeah, that's what's happening. But back home, before I get into more details on that, let's see if I can get to that. But back home, we have a report today that the White House is now officially threatening to remove Simon Atiba from Today News Africa entirely from the White House press briefing. They have officially threatened to revoke his access to the White House in a letter that was sent just in the last 24 hours. The letter, as the Daily Caller reports, threatened either suspension or a total ban after Atiba repeatedly disrupted briefings when Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre failed to call on him. Officials told Atiba that White House correspondents are held to a set of standards, including respecting your colleagues and not impeding events or briefings on campus. Quote, this letter serves as your written warning. It's like he's a school child, pursuant to the May 5th, 2023 notice that the behavior you exhibited on June 26, 2023 is unacceptable. Listen to them wag their finger at this guy. Atiba shared the letter on Twitter. It says, if you continue to impede briefings or events by shouting over your colleagues who have been called on for a question, even after you have been asked to stop by a White House employee, and they're in charge, they're kind of like a flight attendant. If you argue with the White House employee, the federal government's going to make your life a living hell. Don't do it. You listen. You stay in your seat. Keep that seatbelt on. Shut up, Simon Atiba. Your hard pass may be suspended or revoked following notice and an opportunity to respond. We hope you will work with us. This is the mob threat part. That's a nice pass you got there. I hate to see something happen to it. We hope that you will work with us to avoid any future issues in the press briefing room or at other events on the White House grounds. If you would like to comment on this letter, please reply by email within 7 days. I should point out that this follows a Washington Post hit piece against Simon Atiba that was just published this past week, attacking him. Instead of standing in solidarity with him, the Washington Post took up for the federal government. They took up for the White House, and they were grumpy that somebody like Simon Atiba, who is he, could dare be allowed into the White House press briefing and should not be given the time of day. The prejudice against Simon Atiba should continue. That was the position of the Washington Post this past week. Simon tweets out, following Washington Post hit piece meant to prevent me from renewing my hard pass, the White House and Press Secretary Office just sent me a warning letter. Here it is. And then he quotes the letter. You do wonder, what is the relationship between the Washington Post hit piece and the White House threat against Atiba? It wouldn't be the first time we've seen these lefties across various organizations collaborating. You do wonder. Simon, for his part, has released a novel-length statement today on what's going on here. Let's see how much of it I can read. It's not quite novel-length, but it's he's got things to say. He says this, and he speaks broadly to the American people. It's a message from Simon Atiba from Today News Africa to the American people. He says, quote, I would like the American people to know that I believe the White House coordinated with the Washington Post and ordered them to do a hit piece on me days ago to assassinate my character and direct hate towards me and endanger my life and prevent me from renewing my hard pass, which expires on July 31st. I also believe that the White House is coordinating with the Senate Press Gallery, which has taken more than a month to approve my application for me to apply for a hard pass renewal at the White House. They are doing all they can to silence and direct hatred towards me so that people would hate and probably hurt me. As you know, Joe Biden's press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, has not called on me for the past 9 months because of my line of questioning. I have consistently been ignored during briefings for the past 9 months. My emails go unanswered. I am not given the opportunity to ask questions during background calls. Furthermore, I've been restricted from attending nearly all of President Joe Biden's events, including press conferences. Attempts to meet with the press secretary are frequently declined, and other press officials often close their doors on him. He says him here for some reason. He's talking about me. They close their doors on Simon. Him is Simon. Consequently, I have resorted to yelling my questions as a last resort, he says. I have faced discrimination and racism from the left, he writes, the same left that often accuses conservatives of racism. As I continue to face discrimination and racism from the left, I am now close to believing that everything is fake in the United States of America. Press freedom is fake. The First Amendment is fake. Working hard does not pay. Trying to shed light on ties between the United States and Africa as China and Russia expand their influence and push out the United States from the continent is not a good idea, says Simon. And remember, all Simon wants to ask about, by and large, like, yes, there are some Biden scandals that he tries to raise from time to time. All he wants to ask about is U.S.-Africa relations. That's it. This is not, for the most part, these are not going to be politically inconvenient questions to answer for Karine. Maybe it's just that she's too dumb to answer them, so she's constantly trying to pass and go to somebody else. I'm not going to call on that guy because he might ask me about something I don't know anything about. American relations with other countries. I barely know where America is on a map. How am I going to tell him where Africa is? So he says, look, maybe it's not a good idea for me to ask these questions. He goes on, may God have mercy on those defaming me in the newspapers, those assassinating my character and directing hate towards me. I am just calling on the American people to continue to pray for me. When you are defamed, threatened, maligned, and attacked, you begin to question why it is important to continue to be a good person, to try so hard to share the truth, to inform the people, to be honest, when it brings only hatred and suffering. So that's Simon Atiba today. The guy's just trying to defend his ability to ask some questions at the White House. You know how the White House could fix this? You know how there is a way to fix this. Lickety split. Just call on him. Just call on him. Just throw the guy a bone. You don't even have to do it every day. Just do it once a week. Simon, go ahead. This problem goes away 100%. It disappears. He asks about the upcoming Africa conference. Karine says, I'll have to get back to you on that. And they move to somebody else. This is the easiest thing in the world. But you know what's happening here? The White House wants to accelerate the drama. They want to send a lesson to everybody in that press room. Not just Simon, the New York Post, all of them. You want to ask me questions? Don't you dare call out of turn. I'm in charge here. You're not. Karine is boss. You are not. Karine is the captain now. You're not in charge here. And so Simon Atiba is subjected to this. He's calling for prayers in the midst of this fight. So that's what's happening over there. What about the rest of our media? What's going on with them? You know, CNN had a momentary outbreak of truth today. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, so there's a lot going on right now in the life and times of a young man called Dylan Mulvaney. Let me see how much CNN actually covers the underlying story, because I want to talk about that a little bit too. But CNN reporter Ryan Young was on television this morning, and he was reporting on the man who dresses up as a stupid little girl and calls himself Dylan Mulvaney, and then uses a trumped-up accent and says, I've been a girl for hundreds of days. And then he talks about all of the various ointments he's rubbing all over himself. It's just the whole guy. The guy's crazy, obviously. And Bud Light thought it would be a good idea to link up with him. And how's that going for Bud Light? So CNN reporter Ryan Young made the mistake of telling the truth about Dylan Mulvaney on national television this morning by referencing Dylan Mulvaney as a man. That is no bueno over on CNN.
We even talked to a bar in Chicago. One bar was telling us basically they're not going to serve it because they don't like the way Dylan Mulvaney was treated after this whole controversy started. He, of course, is the transgender person they were going to sponsor and go along with Bud Light. They didn't like how Bud Light didn't stand by him after all this.
Okay, well, so now that is a normal human being talking about this issue. I don't know this Ryan Young, so I don't want to vouch for everything he's ever done in his career. But as far as I'm concerned, we need to defend Ryan Young at all costs. He just said something true out loud in public on national television. Isn't that an amazing thing? So he says he's talking about Dylan Mulvaney and the Bud Light's decision to partner with him. And I'm told now, this is by way of correction, I am told now that this was yesterday. This wasn't this morning. But I saw the clip going around this morning, and I was like, I got to talk about this. So Ryan Young, in the words of the left, misgendered Dylan Mulvaney, which is accurately described. That's what that means. When you hear the word misgender, what that means is that person is accurately describing something. And so it didn't take an hour for CNN to walk this back. Now, they concluded this little reporter hit where they go to Ryan Young and he tells everybody what's happening and he actually tells the truth. But by the end of the hour, CNN issued an apology for what you just heard, which is the least offensive thing in the world. It's just a guy telling the truth. Here's CNN.
Before we wrap up today, we do want to make an important note. Yesterday, in a segment about transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney.
I'm just screwing the pooch on telling you some of this. Now, this was apparently 24 hours. It took some hemming and hawing. They said yesterday during the segment. Okay, so this is the new thing from today. It wasn't less than an hour. So they had to take the evening to meet and discuss what are we going to do about this. So today, this is CNN's follow-up.
Before we wrap up today, we do want to make an important note. Yesterday, in a segment about transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney, who was featured in Bud Light's recent campaign, she was mistakenly referred to by the wrong pronoun.
No. He was correctly referred to by the right pronoun. Now you're trapped in some sort of Orwellian hellscape where you're telling us that she was mistakenly referred to by the wrong pronoun.
Mulvaney, who was featured in Bud Light's recent campaign, she was mistakenly referred to by the wrong pronoun. And CNN aims to honor individuals' ways of identifying themselves, and we apologize for that error.
What a clownish network, a clownish statement. Is Ryan Young safe right now? Where is Ryan Young? I'd like to know about his status right now. Is he suffering the consequences of all of this? Is there some sort of room they lock you in? What happens at CNN if you accurately describe something? What is the punishment for truth? Ryan Young is probably going through it right now, and our prayers are with Ryan Young. Again, defend Ryan Young at all costs. This man told the truth on CNN. And that's the first step. Just start telling the truth, baby. It's fine. And you know, it's funny. This guy goes on the air, CNN's Ryan Young, refers to Dylan Mulvaney as a dude.
We even talked to a bar in Chicago. One bar was telling us basically they're not going to serve it because they don't like the way Dylan Mulvaney was treated after this whole controversy started. He, of course, is the transgender person they were going to sponsor and go along with Bud Light. They didn't like how Bud Light didn't stand by him after all this.
And so what ends up happening is you get all these hall monitors in the press. They said, CNN's misgendering Dylan Mulvaney. The Daily Beast with a headline. They were right on top of it. Johnny on the spot. CNN misgenders Dylan Mulvaney in cringe segment on Bud Light boycott. The Advocate, which is supposed to be like the leading gay publication in the country, they're taking up for mutilation. They said CNN gets blasted for misgendering Dylan Mulvaney, apologizes. And the list goes on. So all these guys are attacking CNN for telling the truth. Let me get Steve in Ashburn on here. Line 1. Steve, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon, Vince. Excellent topic. Just quickly, I think that the CNN reporter is going to be sent to a gender re-education camp. I'm sure that CNN has such a place. And just like in 1984, maybe this is room 1, where they will have to break him so that it doesn't happen again. And maybe he'll come back with an ankle monitor or something that every time, or maybe a monitor someplace else on his body, gets shocked whenever he tries to misgender somebody else. Then he'll come back with a big happy face because he's been drugged, and then everything will be fine.
Yeah, and the key with it was room 101. The key with that room, in Orwell's 1984 is not just that you say the words. You have to so thoroughly convince yourself that you don't believe any alternative. That's the end game.
Yes.
And
Yes,
Ryan
and
Young.
Yep. And you know how 1984 ends?
Not well.
Not well for Winston.
No,
not
Winston.
Very well at all.
Winston. I don't want to give away the ending, but use your imagination. Actually, read the book. It's a quick read. It's a super quick read. Ryan Young currently being subjected to Room 101. He won't screw up again if they ever let him near the air again. Coming up, Congressman Ben Cline just posed a couple of questions to the FBI director. He'll tell us what he learned. That's ahead. Good afternoon to you. 5:34 now, WMAL. Great to have you with us. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Earlier today, FBI Director Christopher Wray testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. Here's one of the exchanges he had with Virginia Congressman Ben Cline. Take a listen.
Did the FBI have an adequate basis on which to launch Crossfire Hurricane?
My understanding is that Mr. Durham found that it did not have a proper basis to elevate it to a full investigation, but that he thought it was an assessment or a preliminary inquiry was appropriate.
Did the FBI fail to examine all available exculpatory evidence?
I think, well, do you say to examine it? Certainly, I think there were failures, significant failures, with respect to exculpatory information.
Did the FBI interview all key witnesses in Crossfire Hurricane?
I think Mr. Durham, found that they did not.
Did the FBI abuse its authority under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act?
Well, certainly there were violations that were totally unacceptable, and in my view, cannot be allowed to happen again.
All right, the FBI director very comfortable attacking the abuses that happened prior to his tenure, but what about during his tenure? Let's explore all of this with Congressman Ben Cline, the man you just heard. He represents Virginia's 6th Congressional District, and he joins me now. Congressman, great to have you with us today.
Vince, great to be with you.
Tell me about your exchange today with Chris Wray. What did you think of his testimony?
Well, it was evasive, yet he was really agreeing with just about everything that Durham concluded in his report, that there was no basis for Crossfire Hurricane, that they didn't interview all the witnesses, that there was exculpatory evidence left out, that essentially it was based on lies, and then shopped around to get FISA warrants to spy on the members of the Trump campaign in 2016. And those lessons haven't been learned because we're still seeing the FBI continue to run rampant over the civil liberties of American citizens.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the decisions to ignore or downplay Hunter Biden. We're seeing the censorship of American citizens. We're seeing overzealous arrest tactics on protesters outside of abortion clinics. It's amazing, actually, all of this happening. And yet the FBI director, I noticed, sat before you today, Congressman, and insisted that he's fixed all of the problems, that they've been working on that, and it's a different FBI now. Were you moved by that claim?
Well, no, I wasn't. And I did mention at the beginning of my remarks that the vast majority of employees at the FBI are honest, hardworking citizens, and there are unfortunately some bad actors, some political actors within the FBI who have discredited the agency quite severely. But when I asked him of the 5 individuals who were involved in the drafting of the Catholic memo in Richmond, urging that FBI put moles into churches in the Richmond area to try and target what they called radical Christians, or radical Catholics, that had any of them been fired? He said no. He said that it's under review, and I could only get him to agree that there's the potential that they could be fired if their internal review finds and warrants their dismissal. But unfortunately, accountability is slow to come in this FBI. We're going to have to demand it, and we're going to use the power of the purse to get it.
Yeah, I mean, because if you were running the FBI and you were doing it while following your oath to the Constitution, if somebody announced that they were going to start targeting Catholic churches, you'd launch them out a window. I mean, you wouldn't sit around and be like, we got to figure out what really happened here and do a months-long investigation. You'd immediately bring some consequences, wouldn't you?
You would, and not even considering that you're probably afoul of either a couple of laws or the Constitution to suggest that Congress can't get the answers that it wants until an internal department review occurs. I mean, if Congress sends a subpoena, if they demand the documents, and Jim Jordan, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, was demanding the names of and the individuals involved in the drafting of that memo testify, that he could somehow be put off by the director of the FBI because they're slow rolling him, essentially. It's ridiculous.
There was also some exchanges today between Chris Wray and Congressman Kevin Kiley, for one, as well as Congresswoman Laurel Lee. They were talking at some length about the Justice Department's decision to treat parents who speak up at school board meetings as extremists and terrorists. I noticed that Christopher Wray appeared to be distancing himself from that decision, suggesting that decisions about whether or not the Justice Department memo should be rescinded should be for Attorney General Garland. He also said at one moment that he can't get into discussions he had and, more importantly, discussions he didn't have, suggesting that the Attorney General never consulted him before this went forward. I thought that was interesting. Did you?
I did. I thought it was very revealing. He was trying to avoid letting us know exactly how little contact they had on that, but apparently there are rogue independent directions that the FBI is moving on different subjects. The problem is, as a congressman from the Commonwealth of Virginia, we're seeing a lot of this activity in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Yes.
And it does show that there's a concentration of this abuse, this political power that's being used, is being done from the FBI headquarters in Washington rather than the field offices, which is where Chairman Jordan suggested that this needs to be moved to. So he wrote to the chair of appropriations and said, as part of your appropriations process, why don't you direct the FBI start decentralizing and moving out to these to the field offices, and we can reconsider whether we want to give them a whole new building in the D.C. area that essentially is larger than the Pentagon.
That's right. It's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, the relationship between Virginia to a lot of these scandals, because I can think of two off the top of my head. One is what you just mentioned, the Richmond field office being involved in targeting Catholics. The other is the decision by the Biden White House and the National School Board Association, in association with the Justice Department, to treat Scott Smith, a loving father in Loudoun County, as some sort of domestic extremist as their justification for going after parents. It does keep on coming back to Virginia, doesn't it?
It does, and it's you saw the fury with which parents in Loudoun County just let school boards know how disenchanted they were with the way in which their children were being taught or indoctrinated, as it were.
Right.
And they wanted to express that outrage. Their First Amendment freedom of speech rights were under attack when the FBI essentially treated them as domestic terrorists and opened investigations on them. So we are defending the Constitution. We are defending the freedom of speech that is inherent in that Constitution, and that is the right of every American and every parent to exercise at a school board meeting. So we'll continue to fight that abuse and work to pass legislation to protect it through the appropriations process. The power of the purse is real, and we are using it here right now.
So speaking of the power of the purse and appropriations, I heard a couple of Republican lawmakers today raise the idea of defunding either the FBI director specifically or more broadly portions of the FBI. Is there any serious traction on that? Is that threat a real one hanging over Christopher Wray's head? I know a lot of people in our audience would like to actually see some movement there.
Well, we can't rule out amendments that will be offered. The Rules Committee will determine what amendments are going to be allowed on the floor. But there is, as part of the negotiation over Speaker McCarthy's getting the votes to become Speaker, he agreed and leadership put back in place something called the Holman Rule, which allows the line item rescission of a salary of a bureaucrat in the federal government. So essentially, if you can find and describe the job in its code as it is in the federal government in the bill, it can be offered as an amendment. And you can essentially zero out that salary. That's not the same as firing them because they can be moved around essentially, but you can essentially put them on notice that their activities are not acceptable, yes, and that they should be removed from that authority with which they abuse that authority.
This this is an agency that is so out of control that you had a federal judge say in recent weeks that what he's looking at the hands of the FBI appears to be some of the most egregious violations of the First Amendment, perhaps in our country's history, in the form of the coercion that the FBI has wielded over social media companies. Chris Wray said that coercion continued, didn't use that word, but he said that relationship continued up until the judge's injunction about a week or so ago. And he also revealed that the FBI has indeed worked with Bank of America, for instance, the FBI requesting gun purchase data from Bank of America willingly handing it over. No warrant involved. It's just corporations working to hand over the data of American citizens, including people accused of no crime whatsoever. Congressman Ben Cline, you have to be concerned about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every American should be concerned about the abuses of power of rogue agents within the FBI, and it has really distressed enough of us to where we're going to be using the power of the purse to roll back a lot of that authority. There are going to be policy riders that are put in place in the Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Bill that are going to ensure that that collusion doesn't take place, that the FBI doesn't engage in these restrictions of expression targeting conservatives over social media posts or activities by social media companies, and in addition to the number of other areas where the FBI has overstepped.
There are so many fires to put out. Congressman, I hope you can put some of them out, at least on behalf of the American people. Thank you very much. Congressman Ben Cline from Virginia. Good to talk to you today, sir.
Thanks, Vince.
Let me focus on another congressman for a moment. Congressman Mike Johnson today asked Christopher Wray about this social media coercion that the FBI has been doing to censor the American people. And if the if the relationship was on the up and up, the Biden administration wouldn't be appealing the judge's injunction right now. The judge has only foreclosed censorship of American citizens. That's what the judge has cut off. And the Biden administration has been appealing this to the courts. So please let us censor. Please let us censor. The judge specifically said, if you have credible information about threats, then you can absolutely send them to these social media companies. You don't have to shut down that conversation. It's only about censorship, violating the First Amendment. You can't do indirectly what you are forbidden from doing directly, United States government. Here's Congressman Mike Johnson and Christopher Wray today on this.
The court ordered the White House, DOJ, and FBI, among others, to immediately cease colluding with and coercing social media companies to suppress American speech, of course, conservative speech in particular. Director Wray, I find it stunning. You made no mention of this court opinion either in your opening statement today or in this lengthy 14-page report.
Because he doesn't take it seriously.
You prepared on July 12th, which is 8 days after the court ruling. Have you read the ruling, sir?
I am familiar with the ruling, and I've reviewed it with our Office of General Counsel.
I got the Cliff's Notes version.
Are you deeply disturbed by what they've told you about the ruling if you haven't read it yourself?
Obviously, we're going to comply with the court's order, the court's preliminary injunction.
Won't answer.
We sent out guidance to the field and the headquarters about how to do that. Needless to say, the injunction itself is a subject of ongoing litigation, and so I'll decline to comment further on.
Yeah, they sent out notice to everybody. Hey, censorship squad, you guys are on break. We don't know for how long, but you'll be back in soon. Don't worry. So they said they took a break. He was asked, "Are you upset about what you're hearing here? Because this seems pretty damning, isn't it? The abuses at the hands of the FBI." And he says, "Oh, we're following this court order." Okay, great. Thanks for that. Who else do we have here? We've got a lot of these clips today, don't we? It was hours long. Congressman Andy Biggs, who we spoke with yesterday, wanted to know whether or not Christopher Wray was familiar with somebody called Matthew Graves. That would be the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia.
Director, thanks for being here. Who is Matthew Graves? Who is Matthew Graves?
I believe Matthew Graves, at least the person I'm thinking of, is, I think, the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia.
That's the person I'm thinking of, too. Are you aware that he has promised more than 1,000 more individuals will be charged or indicted related to January 6th?
I had not heard that he had said that.
Well, it seems arbitrary, and there's reports that it's kind of a quasi-quota system that he's put together for January 6 prosecutions. Do you approve of targets, goals, quotas in prosecuting alleged criminal conduct?
Well, certainly not quotas. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, goals is a little bit more of an ambiguous term, but
certainly not quotas.
Certainly not quotas.
Do you know if any of your personnel at the FBI is involved in the investigations promised that will lead to indictments by the January 6th quota established by U.S. Attorney Graves?
That doesn't sound familiar to me.
Okay. Yeah. Andy Biggs is right. Matthew Graves has promised upwards of 1,200 more people could be charged with January 6 violations. He said that this year, more than 2 years after the events at the Capitol, we could be charging another 1,200 people. Wow. And of course, the FBI director knows nothing. Where Kamala Harris just explains things. That's all. It's just Kamala Harris telling you how things work. Here she is this week describing artificial intelligence.
And I think the first part of this issue that should be articulated is AI is kind of a fancy thing. It's, first of all, it's 2 letters. It means artificial intelligence. But ultimately what it is it's about machine learning. And so the machine is taught.
Wow.
And part of the issue here is what information is going into the machine. That will then determine, and we can predict then, if we think about what information is going in, what then will be produced in terms of decisions and opinions that may be made through that process.
I mean, she cannot be serious. This reminds me of, do you remember the movie Zoolander? Do you remember that? You ever see that movie? When they're really stupid. They're trying to get to the files, and they say they're in the computer.
Did you find the files?
I don't even know what they look. What do they look like?
They're in the computer.
They're in the computer?
Yeah, they're definitely in there. I just don't know how he labeled them.
I got it.
You gotta figure it out.
Roger. In the computer. It's so simple.
He's just staring. He's like, it's inside the computer. That's Kamala Harris. That's who she is. All right, the great one, Mark Levin, is up next. He actually knows how things work.